Hello, welcome to the first event of Workshop Weekend. We have 3 days of events related to today being Unity Day, tomorrow being Production Career, and the last day being Game Engines and Art Software. We're going to start out today, the first event of Workshop Weekend with YarnSpinner for Unity. I'm going to turn it over to Connor.
Hello, how's everyone doing? So yeah, this is YarnSpinner. It's a dialogue engine for Unity. I'll be going a bit into the engine software itself, the creation of it, some of the tools. Then I'll go right into a demo of installing it and creating a basic situation where you might want to use some dialogue and with some of the cool features of YarnSpinner. Has anyone here used YarnSpinner before? Okay, I think
I used it
couple
like
people.
last year when you guys did the same event.
Okay, couple people, cool. So just a quick overview of what I'm going to be talking about. So we'll start with an introduction, just what is YarnSpinner, some of the basics behind it. I'll then go into a demo where I'll be installing it, showing how to run different Yarn scripts to actually play your dialogue. I'll be going over nodes, variables, and conditionals, some of the 3 most important attributes of running dialogue in YarnSpinner. Then I wanted to make sure I could cover custom yarn functions, which I know in the previous time I taught YarnSpinner, we didn't have the chance to go over, because that's really one of the most versatile features of the plugin. And then I'll talk about some additional resources at the end if you'd like to learn more or support the creators, any of that. All right, so what the hell is YarnSpinner? So it's a Unity plugin. There is a version now for Godot as well, and I believe they're trying to get it into more engines. But it was originally made for Unity, and it's basically a straightforward way to create dialogue for games. It was actually originally developed for Night in the Woods, just as a way of creating dialogue for that game, and then they ended up releasing it for free. So it's publicly available. A lot of games have used it, completely commercial free, so you can make something with YarnSpinner, publish it, don't have to pay any royalties. And it uses a proprietary programming language called Yarn, which we'll go into in a bit. It's the best way I can describe it is it's basically if Twine was a programming language, which it kind of is, but it was modeled heavily after Twine, so it's really easy for even like non-programmers to get the hang of it. And it is almost entirely open source. If I made this presentation a month ago, I would have said it was entirely open source. But we'll get into that in a sec, because they do have paid options now as well. All right, so that's cool, but how do you use it? So for anyone that wants to follow along, there's a few ways to actually install YarnSpinner. I'm going to be showing what's typically recommended, which is the Open UPM. So I will have to switch over to Unity in a second. So if anyone wants to install and follow along, I'd recommend taking a picture of these 3 strings, just so you can enter those in. Give a second for people.
I'll post it in the Discord.
Yeah, if you want to post it on the Discord, that'd be good. So I have a Unity open right here. And if you've never installed via OpenUPM or the project settings package manager, very simple. If you go to edit, then scroll down to your project settings. I usually like to just dock them at the bottom next to the project and console, so it's easier to access. Then you're going to see a tab pretty close to the top called Package Manager. And you'll be able to add what's called a scoped registry. So in your package manager, you'll have different things called registries, which are essentially just plugins that you can use to basically bring different packages into Unity. And by using a scoped registry, you can basically add one from the net. I just said from the net. Add one from that was posted online. So I'm going to open the Discord because I don't remember what the specific URL is off the top of my head. Nick, where'd you put it?
Workshops.
Workshops, cool.
Did you need the USB to?
No, because we're doing it over Zoom, so sorry about that. I forgot. All right. So the name we're going to be installing via Open UPM. It is case sensitive, so keep that in mind. Capital on UPM and the O in Open. The URL HTTPS / package dot openupm.com, and then the scope, which is the actual package we want to fetch, is dev.yarnspinner. All right, so if that's all good, and if I now hit save, it's going to go and get that package. All right, didn't return any errors, so that's a good sign. So now after it is saved, if I open up Window and go into my package manager, and if I switched from packages to in project to my registries, YarnSpinner will be right there. So from here, now all you have to do is install it. So this might take a few seconds to do because there are quite a few packages. And before we actually get into using YarnSpinner itself, I'll go over a bit of the starter code that they provide. So for this tutorial, I'm not going to be using any of the starter code. I'm just going to be doing it all from scratch, which for most cases I would recommend. But there are some cases where you want a very specific type of dialogue or a specific system in place. Using one of the starter files might be helpful for you. So yeah, YarnSpinner is installed now. So if I reopen the package manager now under YarnSpinner, there should be, of course, they changed it on the new update. Whoops. A drop down that shows different plugins you can get. Samples, here it is. Yeah, they did change the UI of it. So there's a bunch of different sample projects you can download. I would highly recommend if you're interested in making a specific type of game, like if you want to make visual novels, have a tool for that. The phone chat one, that's what I used in Scoops and Social Isolation as a base to get so it scrolls upwards like text messages. One of the newer things they added is the markup palette, where you can create markup so make the text look fancy and have all sorts of effects. But for this tutorial, we're just going to stick with none of the samples and just do it all from scratch. So once you have YarnSpinner installed, any questions up until this point on the installation itself? Nope. Okay. So in your project window under packages, it's alphabetized. So all the way down, you'll see YarnSpinner. And it's mostly licenses and other README files. But the important thing you're going to want to find is the prefabs folder. And then you're going to see a bunch of options here. And the only one we really care about at the moment will be a dialogue system. So if we just drag that into our scene, first it'll ask us to import TextMesh Pro, which I would recommend doing so you can get the best text options. But after that, it'll say it's not set to an instance of an object. That no worries, that's just for the importing. So that's not going to cause an issue. So now if we go ahead and check out YarnSpinner, we first resize the window a bit. That's fine. You'll notice we have the character name and we have our dialogue system in place. So what are the actual attributes in the dialogue system? Well, first off, we have our canvas. So this, pretty much like any other canvas in Unity, will contain two options, a line view. This is basically the lines of dialogue that'll be presented to the player, and an options list view. And this is if you have options in your game. So if they ask a question, you have to put in a response. That's what that will handle. We can get a bit more into those in a bit. But what we want to focus on is a component of dialogue system called the dialogue runner. And so this is pretty much the engine that's going to handle all of the dialogue transferring. So you'll notice right at the top, we have a Yarn project tab, and there's currently no Yarn project made. So let's go ahead and fix that. So I'm going to make a folder, your assets, and I'll just call this dialogue. And under dialog, if you go to create, you'll see a YarnSpinner tab at the top. You'll be able to do yarn scripts, yarn projects, or markup palettes. We're not going to go over markup palettes today, since that's more of a stylistic advanced topic. But first thing we're going to look at is we need a yarn project. And I'll just call this proj, nice simple name. So if I just drag this project into the dialog runner, then this is basically saying you want the dialog runner to run off of this new project we've created. Problem is that the project is currently completely empty. So I'll continue the spiel about YarnSpinner. So we've just as a rundown, so we have our dialog system in the scene. We've made a new yarn project that we've linked up to it. If we hit play, give it a sec. Nothing's going to happen. And in fact, we're going to get a message in the console. Can't start dialog from node start. Two reasons, actually. One is because we don't have a node start. But the bigger reason is that we don't have any nodes, period. And to fix that, we'll have to make a yarn script. So once again, I'm going to right click, go to create, YarnSpinner. And this time I'm going to hit yarn script. And I'll just call this yarn script. I don't know. Double click to open it. So Yarn is a programming language. So you can open it in pretty much any IDE. I would recommend VS Code though. I don't want to do my subscriptions. Because in VS Code, and I don't know if they've actually added any extensions to other IDEs since, but there's a really good YarnSpinner extension. I can't install it since I already have it installed. But it basically adds all the syntax and IntelliSense for YarnSpinner. It makes it all just a lot more readable. There's also if you just type in like YarnSpinner editor, there's an online version as well that's formatted a lot like Twine. So you can actually edit things like inside the nodes just as you would in Twine and then export that as a yarn file. So if you are, I would say it's not a very intense programming language, but if you do want to like completely forgo any programming, that is an option as well. But I'm going to go back to my yarn script. And so the basic thing you'll see is that this is what's called a node. So nodes will always start with the 3 dashes and with the 3 equal signs. And they all will have a title. And there's the option of giving them tags. Tags can be used for locating certain nodes. I'm going to go ahead, since I don't think we'll end up needing it, I'll just delete that. And basically inside this node is where you can write any of your dialogue. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a classic hello world, and let's do this is some dialogue. So YarnSpinner is one of the languages like Python where it is reliant on spaces, tabs, new lines. So you're not going to see any semicolons. But it does matter where the actual text is. So what I typed here, each line is essentially just translates to one line of dialogue in game. So when this runs, it would say hello world, and then it would say this is some dialogue when you hit continue. So I'm going to save that. And now if I go back into Unity, you'll notice on the Yarn project, so you can add source files to it. So if I hit add, then I could type in the name of any yarn file. What I'd recommend doing though is just what it has built in, which is the **, which if you're familiar with directories, just means that you can access any script in that directory. So as long as your, vector unsaved changes, yep, that's fine. That's the yarn script. So as long as your script and project are in the same folder, the project will automatically be able to locate any of those scripts. And one question I have gotten when talking about YarnSpinner is, do I need multiple yarn projects? And the short answer is no. Typically, you can probably get by with only one yarn project. If you really want to make sure that your yarn project can't access a specific yarn script, you can swap between them. But I would not recommend in the middle of one scene swapping between different yarn projects. It is doable, but it basically has to restart YarnSpinner's process of locating the yarn project and then translating all of the scripts. So it is a bit of a hassle for Unity to do. And it's not as easy as just typing in like, dialog runner.yarn project equals, because that's not, it basically has to process the yarn project at start. So you're going to have to basically restart the dialog system if you do that. But we have our project, we have our yarn script. Now let's see what happens when we hit play. All right, we got the same error as before. Can't start the dialog because there is no node named start. And that's because we check out our dialog runner. The node it's going to look for to start is one called start. So that's just the name of the node it's looking for. So we could change that to the name of our node, which I believe is just the name of the file itself. Yeah, so it automatically will make the first node the same as the file. I'm going to go ahead and just change this to start, though. I think it just makes more sense that way. All right. Let's hit play one last time. And hopefully, there we go. Our dialog is running up. Hello world. There's a continue button built in. This is some dialogue, and then the yarn will end. So a couple things we can do to sort of spice it up first off is you'll notice that there's a character name tab built in. And everything built into YarnSpinner, the character name, the continue button, this little aesthetic line here, they can all be removed just by going to the component inside the canvas and disabling it in the inspector. So it's really nice that you don't have to actually change any of the code for YarnSpinner to do that. But let's go ahead and give a name to this character. So I'll just call them narrator. So if I put a name followed by, or any string of characters followed by a colon, that basically says that this is the name of the person talking. And then you can put a space if you want. I usually just do for readability. That space is not going to be counted for when it's actually parsing through the dialogue. We head back in. Hello world. This is some dialogue. You'll see that we have our narrator's name. I'm actually going to make my game window a bit bigger. We don't really need the scene window much for this. And you can see that we have the name of our speaker and the dialogue playing. If we hit continue, then that's going to come to a close. So a couple things before we get into some of the more nitty-gritties of YarnSpinner, just for convenience sake. Currently, if you're using just what's built in, you'll have to use this continue button every single time. So you have to drag your cursor over, hit continue. But it's actually really, really easy to just map that to a button press. So if you go to add component, one of the things built in when you install the YarnSpinner packages is a component called dialog advanced input. So it's just a pretty basic script. First, you have to give it what the dialog view is. So I'm just going to say that is our line view, since that's what's displaying our dialog. And it's basically by default going to say, okay, whenever you press the space bar, count that as proceeding in dialog. And you can edit it to whatever key you want. You can add multiple instances of the component if you want multiple keys. What I would recommend doing in an actual project is that it's also compatible with Unity's input system. So you can very easily, if you give it an input system, which we don't currently have built in, but we're not going to do for this discussion, then it's very simple to just say, I want this input method, and then every single button press and every control method linked to that will then be counted towards proceeding in dialog. For this, though, we're just going to keep it as hitting the space bar. Couple other things you can do are, let's actually talk about that line view, because this is what's going to be actually showing all the dialogue. So you'll notice we have the use typewriter effect. So this is going to show every single line of dialogue one by one. So if I turn that off, you'll notice a few things disappeared, and that's what's linked to the typewriter effect. So I can change how fast the words appear. So I'm going to slow it down to 20. I could also add, so there's like an on character typed. So if you want it, so like every time a character is typed, you can do like a beep, 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 beep sound. That's how you can do that. Just play it every time a character appears. And then you can also do certain things for if your game is paused. So if you want your dialogue to immediately just pause and then resume, or if you want to make it so if you pause the game, the dialogue won't be paused, you can do that as well. But let's go ahead and hit play. So we changed our typewriter effect to 20. We're enabling the space bar to advance dialogue. And I'm also just going to remove the fade effect. So that's no longer going to allow it to fade in and out. And so it should just appear and disappear. So a little less aesthetic. All right, notice it's going a lot slower. It didn't have the fade in effect that it has by default. I hit space. It'll just continue. Cool. Any questions up until this point? Yep.
I don't know if this is a complicated question, but if you were making a game where the player could choose like their own name, like how would you go about having a name that like kind of changes adaptively?
Good question. I'm actually, so that for that you would actually need a variable that you can then change. I will actually be going into that in a bit. Yeah, so I will go over how you can do that. I'm going to go ahead and just make the text go a bit quicker because 20 is very slow. So say you want to save this. So want to just save to our dialogue system prefab. Unfortunately, you cannot. And you cannot because everything in the Yarn package that you installed can't be changed. So instead, what I'd recommend doing, I'm going to go ahead and make a prefabs folder. Is I'm just going to take this dialogue system, right click, prefab. I'm just going to completely unpack it. Then I'm just going to drag it back into this new prefabs folder. So now if I make any change, so let's say we'll slow it down a bit to 90 for the speed. I can then go ahead, overrides, and then apply it to my new prefab, which is basically just copying the starter code and original files from YarnSpinner. Okay, so that's pretty much the basics of how to just get dialogue running. The next things we're going to talk about are nodes, conditionals, and variables. So for starters, I've already talked a bit about nodes. So we have our starting node right here. And you can make another node very easily. So just like we did with our starting node, if we do a title, I'm going to call it next. We do the 3 dashes, 3 equal signs, and we have a brand new node. Now, here's something really cool if you have the YarnSpinner extension installed to VS Code, is there's a show graph button. And here you can basically show all your nodes in a visual form on this graph. And you'll notice if I drag them around, you'll see there's a position component that's added. Doesn't affect the game at all. That's literally just for the sake of debugging and convenience. But we have 2 completely separate nodes now. I can immediately delete them if I wanted to. So as I said, I don't want start, just do that. I'm going to bring it back because I do want it. If you hit the little pencil button, it'll immediately jump to that node within your editor, so you can go ahead and change it. So let's just add some text to next. So we're going to say narrator. This is new text. All right. Now, one thing I do want to go over right before we get into actually jumping from one node to the other is the ability to add options. So instead of this is some dialogue, let's have them ask a question. So is this some dialogue? And you can pretty easily add options in YarnSpinner by just typing an arrow. So minus right arrow. And then this will basically serve as an option the player can choose. So let's say the option is, yes, it is dialogue. And then the other option will be, no, it isn't. So then from there, if you press enter, make a new line, and just do an indent, this will be the response. So whatever I type now, as long as it's indented over, will be the response if I select yes, it is dialogue. So let's then have the narrator say, very cool, man. And if you say it's not dialogue, narrators will simply say, I'll leave now. So let's go ahead and try that out, and then we can see what the actual option screen will look like when we run it. Give it a sec. All right, is this some dialogue? And right off the bat, you'll notice we have a screen, so it'll show the last line. Again, that's something you can disable. Just find the component in the canvas, turn it off. And we have our two options. So you can use the mouse to highlight them. You can also use the arrow keys. So if I want to say, yes, it is dialogue, I had space as my advanced input. That also means I can use space to select options. Then it'll go straight into this new dialogue. Very cool, man. So one thing you can do is you can keep adding dialogue. So I can say narrator dialogue is pretty sweet. Now, you can keep doing this pretty much infinitely as long as they're all tabbed over one. Problem is, if you do this infinitely, that's going to get really, really messy. So perhaps instead, let's go ahead and bring this code into our next node. And instead of having this all as part of our start node, we're just going to have the start node jump straight into the next node. And it's very simple to do that. And this will be our first use of a function in Yarn. So to make a function, all you have to do is do a double triangular brackets, just double open, double close. And if you have the YarnSpinner plugin or the extension installed, it'll show you all the options right off the bat. So we'll get into declare and set. Those are for variables. We have our classic if, end if, else if conditionals. We'll have stop and wait. I'll talk about those in a second. But then we have jump. So jump is basically what we can use to transfer from one node to another. So all you have to do is jump and then type in what the node you want to go to is. So let's just say next. And you'll notice over on our grid now that a little visual arrow has appeared. That's basically saying, hey, the start node now has a way to connect over to next. So let's go ahead and try that out. Hello world, there's some dialogue. Yes, it is dialogue. This is new text. And now it's running through our new node. And you'll actually notice in the console by default, it has some pretty basic debug statements. And it'll say once it starts running a new node. So it starts with the start node, and it then gives a message to say, hey, we moved on, and now we're running a new node. So that's how you can basically have them jump between each other. We could also add in, let's do another command. Let's say wait, and then we just say how many seconds, 3. And then there's also the stop command. If you ever want to stop your dialogue short, usually I haven't honestly used that much, because usually when that happens, you would just have that be the end of the dialogue. But there are some cases where you would want to just stop the dialogue, usually within some conditionals. Go ahead, hello world. Is this some dialogue? Yes, it is. Some new text. It's going to wait a few seconds, then pick right back up and continue the dialogue. All right. Any questions up until this point?
Can you make it not wait a few seconds?
You can. You can take out the wait command.
Oh,
Yeah.
why would you want it to wait 3 seconds then?
Dramatic effect. If you have like a cutscene playing during the dialogue, you want a character to walk over and then wait a bit, or you can have it specifically. We'll go into how you could potentially trigger it at specific moments. But yeah, you can have your dialogue wait if you would like. Then next thing I want to go over is variables. So Yarn has 3 different variable types. We have 20 minutes left, so that should be enough time. So Yarn doesn't have ints, floats, doubles, all the different numeric values. It's just one called number. So Yarn has numbers, booleans, and strings, and that's it. So to create a variable inside one of our nodes, we're going to use that declare function we saw. So to denote a variable in Yarn, you just have to make sure it starts with a $sign. So we'll just call this num declare it equal to 0. So we're setting a new variable called num equal to 0. So there are variable types, but not explicitly declared. So by setting it equal to 0, we're saying that this variable is a number, or we don't actually have to say like new number equals 0 within Yarn. And then all you have to do is this some dialogue. Let's say if you say no, it isn't. Before they leave, let's just have them say the current number is, and then if we do a squiggly bracket, it'll automatically show all of our variables up front, and we can add in num. So anything inside the curly braces is basically saying that you want to access any data stored in a variable. World, no, it isn't, and the current number is 0. And you can actually see every value of your Yarn variables during runtime. So Yarn also has a component on the dialog system called the in-memory variable storage. So this is basically just what's currently storing all of our Yarn variables. If we open up debug variables, we'll see that num is equal to 0. It's single, basically meaning it's one variable. It's not like a list or an array. And that's what you can basically check at any point during your game what all your YarnSpinner variables are equal to, which is really helpful. And since we have variables, we can also have conditionals. So let's set num to 5. So let's say that if they select no, it isn't, well, let's change the response based on what that number is. So just like before, do the open close triangular braces. And you can do a pretty simple if statement. So just say if num, and just like in most languages, you can do is equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than. So let's just say if it's greater than 3, indent to say that this is what's happening after the if statement. So pretty much in Yarn, anytime you have an option, a conditional, to basically say you want it inside it, you just have to indent. And we're just going to put in this line here. Then we can include an else. We'll just do else. They'll say, I'll leave now. And then to end an if, all you have to do is do end if there. So, and that's going to tell your dialog runner to just go back to normal, stop checking for different conditionals. So we're going to check if the number is greater than 3. If it is, we'll say the current number is. Otherwise, we'll say, I'll leave now. And let's test it out with that number as 2. Oh, I selected the wrong one. I'll leave now because our variable is less than 3. So I'm going to move on from variables. I do want to make sure we have time to go over custom functions. But this is also how you could create different player names. Just instead of narrator, you could declare a variable, have a function that sets whatever you want their name to be, and just feed that in instead of a specific narrator or some other name. So one of the coolest things you can do with Yarn is that you're not restricted to what's actually built in to the plugin, as you can pretty much add whatever you want as a Yarn function relatively easily. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to make a new project. Not new project, sorry, a new game object. And I'm just going to call this our yarn commands. Though you could also just add a component to the dialog system as well, if you want to just have it at all times active for your yarn commands. I'll just do this for the sake of making it more visible what I'm doing. And I'm going to make another folder for scripts. I think each of these folders only have one thing in them, so I don't know if I really needed to make them, but it's a habit. And we're going to make a C# script. And I'm just going to call this script yarn functions. And I will add that as a component. Oh, let it compile first, and then we'll add it as a component to our yarn commands class. Or our object, sorry. Yarn functions, and I'll change the name of this to yarn functions just to keep them consistent. Commands, functions, they're both used within the community. So if I open up the C# file, so it's actually opened up in a new window, since this is actually, by opening C#, you're opening up the whole Unity directory. Yarn is just opening up the file, which is, I always thought was interesting. Though you could then, if I just close this out, I can reopen the yarn file in this window. So it's not really a big deal. So I'm going to get rid of start and update, because I don't need them for this. And to add yarn functions, the one thing we'll need to add is the yarn namespace. So if I do using yarn.unity, and it seems IntelliSense is not on right now. That's interesting. Let me try to fix that in a sec. If not, sometimes Unity works in mysterious ways. Settings, generate project files. Try opening that up again. So if you want to basically create a yarn command, all you have to do inside square brackets is type yarn command. So there we go. There's the IntelliSense. And then following this, you can make a new line. You can just type right after it. You're just going to create a function like you would any other function in Unity. The one thing to keep in mind, though, since it is going to be accessed through yarn, is that the function does have to be public. So public void. And let's make a function that pretty much just, let's say it just feeds a number into YarnSpinner. Or let's have it first get a number out of YarnSpinner. So get variable. So in this case, we could make it a different data type. We're just going to have it print it. So we're going to have it feed in what we want yarn to give us. So let's just say int num debug.log num. Cool. So pretty basic. We're just giving it a variable and having it take it out. But we're going to be using YarnSpinner to actually give it that variable. So if we go back into our yarn script, then we can pretty easily, and I'll do this right from the start after hello world, double brackets, just add our new yarn function. So it's called get variable. So then you have to say the target. So that's whatever the object that has the script on it is called. So one thing I want to point out is I named it yarn functions with a space in the middle, and whatever game object houses your yarn function can't have a space, since spaces are how yarn basically determines what each new parameter or function is whether there's a space between them. So we're just going to change that. All right. Let's type in yarn functions, and then the number we want to give it. And then let's just feed in our variable. And another thing about yarn variables is that there are no private variables. So every variable is global. So anything we declare in start, we could then access in our next script as well. All right, now assuming I remembered all the syntax for that. Hello world, is this some dialogue? All right, and let's check. So we automatically outputted when that happened our number. So that's how you can get a variable from Yarn and get it into Unity. And then we can also work the other way around. So I'm going to erase what we have here in start. And let's just make a hypothetical situation where you have a set amount of money and you're talking to a character who has an item. And then you basically are given the option to buy the item if you have the amount of money. So we're going to first declare a variable for our money. Declare money. And you can't actually set it to null. So that's just not an option in Yarn. I'll just set it to 0 to start. And we'll just have our person called the merchant. I have a sweet item. It's yours for, I'll keep that on the same line. Let's just say 20 coins. And you could then adjust that, make it a variable, just like I did before. Just for the sake of time, though, I'm going to do it a bit quicker. So let's do a conditional. So if our money variable is greater than or equal to 20, merchant will say, you can buy it. Otherwise, else, merchant will say, not my fault, you're broke. All right, and then of course we have to end our conditional. So we have that all set up. One thing we'll have to do though is actually set our money. So in Yarn functions, I'm just going to make a new variable, serialized field, int money, and let's make a new Yarn command. Let's say public void set money. So we want to say what we actually want to set, or we can just use that money int. All right. But say, hey, I don't remember the syntax for that. I actually don't. Very easy. Go on the YarnSpinner documentation. All right. Go to learn. This is something I'll go over in a couple minutes as well after this final example. And then you'll see commands and functions. All right, so this is what we did before with sort of getting something, but you can see we can also feed in our variables. So take a look through. And I believe all we have to do then is, just like it says here, feed in the $sign followed by, so that would be for a string. I'm completely blanking, and I was going to use this as an example to show the actual system or the documentation. But I believe frequently asked questions. I will just Google it. It is in there. I don't feel like searching through it since we don't have too much time. YarnSpinner, set yarn variable to C# variable. There it is. Yes, because we have to access the actual variable source. That's it. Okay, this is the right page. So our variable storage, which we've talked about before, we can immediately set a value to it. So go ahead, serialize that, go quickly. In-memory variable storage, I'll just call this storage. And for set money, I'll say storage dot set value, double check the syntax. So we have to put it in as a string, our variable name. So we'll do $money, and then we'll just set that to money. Then our yarn script, before we, after we declare money, but before we actually search for it, we'll just call our new function. So set money, target is yarn, it's not how you spell yarn, commands. And what we don't have any other parameters to feed in, so that'll be it. Any questions on what I'm doing? Go ahead and hit play. And it'll give an error because we have not set our money or storage. So let's set our money as 25, and we can drag in the storage from our dialog system. Now let's try that again. All right. Not my fault you're broke. Okay, so there is an error. Yarn command doesn't have correct component. Can't call command set money. Did I mistype it? So the issue here is that we have yarn commands as our source, but in Unity, it's called yarn functions. That's it. That's the reason it wasn't working. So if we just go ahead, change this to yarn functions, hit play. Now, all of a sudden, if we go to our storage, it's going to be set to 25 just as we set it to in our script. So yeah, you can buy it. Cool. So that's working now. All right, thank you. But very quickly, just want to talk about some resources. So if you want to go ahead, documentation is really well formatted. It can be a bit tricky to navigate at times just because there is so much. But usually you just type in what you need, the right page will come up. The Discord server, really nice people there. They've helped me a couple times with trying to figure out how to add something. Basically, if you want to figure out why something's not working. So for this, for example, great place to reach out. And then finally, the itch page, like I mentioned, I would talk about, they have, you can download YarnSpinner there if you want to pay for it. There's a paid version that's completely the same, but there are also some paid plugins. So for example, they just put one out that basically is pretty much the entire dialogue system as it was used in Night in the Woods. So if that's of interest to you, they actually are currently all on sale.
It was made by the people who made Night in the Woods.
It was, yep. All right, so.
It's currently being used for Operation Breadcrumbs.
Ooh.
Check on it.
It's been used for a number of things I've worked on as well. So yeah, thank you for listening, and I will allow it to go off to the next talk.